Alright everyone, welcome to our next medical ethics video. So this is again connected to the medical ethics course that I've been running at Juntendo University this summer, and one of the topics that we discussed was end of life and end of life care. And I thought, because my wife works in this field as a palliative care specialist, she's an internal medicine specialist and a palliative care specialist, it would be maybe interesting for people to hear a bit about her experiences and her ask questions from her, what she does and what her work is like. So I had four students who asked a few questions, 3 to 5 questions, and I sat down with my wife. She's quite busy, so we couldn't do this at a time when we could actually make an interview, but I just typed down her answers. And here I am. I'm gonna make a quick video with her answers to your questions. So the first student asked, what is the most important to the happiness of patients at the end of their lives? So, right, we talked about this issue in ethical context where what makes a life good, basically, how do people see that at the end? And here's my wife's answer. It depends on what the patient cares about. It might be family, it might be buying a car, it might be dreams, connections to people. Sometimes it's a small thing like visiting a family member's grave or their old home. There's no single thing, and it is very personal. Really, religious people care most about their relation to their God and about going to heaven, not going to hell. Some people really save up for a dream, sometimes coming from their parents, and then they try to accomplish shit before they pass away. And the example my wife mentioned was someone who was ill had the dream of buying a certain type of car. Their father wanted to own that kind of car, and they shared this passion for cars and specific collector's cars. And then for this person, it was very important that even though they couldn't drive anymore, they were so ill, before they passed away, they could still get this car and own it, and kind of fulfilled their parents' dream in this way. What kind of painkillers do doctors use, and how do they take care of side effects? So here's the answer. Mostly normal painkillers. So as long as patients are not in very high levels of, not experiencing very high levels of pain, actually doctors try to use painkillers that patients can also get, because some people can still be well enough in their final months to go home occasionally, or visit their family, or stay at home for a while. There are patients who are released for a few days when there's a significant family event like a birthday and everyone gathers, and that's a very meaningful experience at the end of life if someone can go home for a little while. And then of course it's good if painkillers can be quickly bought if they're needed. If patients reach that stage where pain cannot be controlled with normal painkillers, then doctors in Japan use the standard opioids that doctors everywhere in the US and Europe use, and there's a range of these. If you look at any medical textbook on this, you can find out. Imagine the following case. A patient strongly wanted to end their life with no machine and medicine support. There are very few people, but a few people who really want that. However, during the final hours, the patient's condition suddenly changed, and the patient started feeling unbearable strong pain in their chest. The patient, under the influence of the pain, asks for painkillers, right? So they wanted to die without taking anything, but this changes. The patient would die relatively soon, perhaps in 15-30 minutes, so this is really the final stretch. And should we give the patient painkillers or take their earlier clear-headed preference seriously and stick to that, right? So there are interesting cases where people suffer injuries where the pain is so strong. We talked about the Dex-covered case during the course, for example, where someone suffered very severe burns to their whole body, and had amputations later as a result, and they need very, very, very long term, very extremely torturous, painful treatment. I guess that's an analogy, except here the pain isn't very long. It's going to be for a little while at the end of life. But these kind of pains can be extreme. And what should we do in such a case? And in the case of the index covert and some similar cases, the difficulty is that people say under the influence of the pain that they want to die, for example, and they want to refuse treatment. They want to say this is futile, or I don't want this treatment, right? And patient autonomy should give them the right to refuse treatment. But sometimes doctors are very wary withholding treatment, because almost everyone who does survive even quite long treatments, 5 months, 8 months, a year after severe burns, um, later most people still say that, oh yeah, of course I'm happy I stayed alive. I'm not happy I had to go through the enormous pain. And Dex Covert was someone who was an exception, right? He was consistent in saying most of the time that he would have preferred to die, but that's not everyone. Um, right. So what should we do with this patient who when he was well expressed a preference? Well, in such a case, the multidisciplinary team would discuss and also ask the family whether this choice is really fitting the patient's character and values, and whether the family can take the suffering. It's not only about the well-being of the patient, but the well-being of the family as well, especially if they're there. And I would add probably staff as well, right? So if someone is in extreme pain and they are watching them die is very hard, because they're thrashing, screaming, shouting in agony. Maybe they have to be strapped down. Of course, horrible for the family, but horrible for the staff as well. So even if we think that, well, the pain changed the patient's will, and in a way that doesn't reflect their considered authoritative, balanced judgment, uh, this case might be somewhere where it does make sense to give them painkillers and help them to die without the pain, not just for their sake, but also the sake of their family and people who have to take care of them. Nobody should be traumatized, and we should help people, right? One of the goals of palliative care is to help people gain closure and be able to move on uh, with relatively good mental, emotional health. Does palliative care take care of the family of the patient? So my wife's answer: yes, we support the family too, even if the patient doesn't care about their partner or family or friends. The palliative does try to take care of them, and actually, the family is almost as important during this process as the patient themselves. Um, it's a very important part of palliative care that um, it tries to look at the rights, needs, interests not only of the patient. It's a holistic approach, and it includes people who seriously care about the patient and their passing. Does palliative care include care after death, for example, how the remains of the patient are stored or returned to nature and so on? No, we say goodbye at the hospital to the patient. Sometimes we send a letter to the family later after 3 months, and some hospitals hold an annual family gathering. During these gatherings, families visit the hospital. There is a short remembrance ceremony for the patients who passed in the palliative care unit or at that hospital, and staff and patients can remember, staff and family members, visitors can remember the patients who passed away, talk about them. Maybe they had nice impressions, maybe they had some nice memories. Take into account that some patients who choose palliative care might be in hospital for months, so they get to know staff, their physicians, especially specialist nurses who take care of them all the time, but also, of course, their main doctor quite well. And they might form friendships, and people, of course, feel that they have to take care of them, which is a very special kind of bond that forms between humans. And this might be very nice for staff as well as family, and of course for family as well. It's a nice way to remember, express gratitude if they were happy with the care, and also to maybe learn more. Later it's easier to reflect, think about, talk about this time, and for some people it might help, or it might be nice if they can imagine how these last few weeks or months went for someone, and if they had meaningful time where they had good conversations with a nurse or a doctor. That adds a nice touch of how they remember the passing of their family members. Okay, so the second student asked, why are some people afraid of death? Funny question. So this is my wife's take again. People have different reasons. Some people are afraid of the afterlife, others of not seeing their family, or worried about suffering after death in some way, or they worry about what will happen to their family. This is, according to my wife, the main reasons that people mention. To me, this was quite interesting in the sense that Japan is not religious in the sense in which, say, some people in Europe or the US are, or like maybe more devout Christians, or Hindus who really are firm believers in karma and rebirth, or yeah, some people who are Islam believers. But of course, Buddhism also has a notion of karma and rebirth, and hell as well, or becoming free from the cycle of rebirth. So this must influence some people, and in every culture, sometimes even non-religious people turn a bit religious or mystical at the end of life. We all get tempted by hope that we continue to exist in some way. And of course, the other things are mostly connected to our social side, right? We are social beings. Even we simply are. If someone doesn't live a social life, something went wrong in their life, right? So if they don't have any attachments, that's very, very sad, and it can happen, but it's usually quite tragic. And then usually people worry about those they love, and how their life is going to go on, what's going to happen to their children, grandchildren. There's almost always someone in the family whose life might not be going that well at the moment, and yeah, that can give rise to concern. Do you want to tell patients everything about their condition, prognosis, risks, or only to make a full disclosure, have a full discussion with the family, or both, right? So, right, here's the answer. It's not about what the physicians want. We are supposed to explain everything. What is the situation? What are the risks? What might happen? And the patient has a right to know, even if the patient's family doesn't like this. Okay, so sometimes the family might say, oh, this person is very sensitive, or this person can't take the truth. It doesn't matter what the family says in this way. What matters is that the patient has a right to know. A long time ago, families had a right to ask doctors not to tell the patient about their conditions. So sometimes people had cancer and they didn't know. In the US and the UK as well, it was customary that, for example, the husband was told, but the wife not, and some husbands then withheld the information. And I think this is absolutely horrible, because then of course people cannot make any choices about their treatment options. People cannot make any choices about how they would like to structure their life. They don't know how much time they have left. They don't know what to expect. Everything comes as a confusing, shocking surprise. They're absolutely kept in the dark. Luckily, this is not the case anymore. Practice changed everywhere, including Japan. I don't know about everywhere. Some parts of the world might still do this differently, but luckily here in Japan, this is not the case anymore. These days, physicians consult the family, and maybe some weeks are omitted, or some information pieces are omitted or explained only in a vague, gentle way, right? So we doctors still talk to the family before talking to the patient, to get a good feel about how best to communicate to things to the patient. So someone might not need to know every single detail of a surgical procedure. They might not need to know every single detail of exactly what is expected in how their condition might get worse week by week. But they have to know what their condition is, what the different treatment options are, and how those are going to change their life. And some people, the way of communication can be different, right? Some people you can just say, look, this is what the problem, this is what we propose, this is how much time we are looking at. Whereas with other people, you have to have slower, gentler, patient-led communication and conversations. You have to wait for the patients to ask things. Some patients ask us not to explain to them, so it's their preference that they don't want to. That's a different thing. In that case, it is okay not to tell. It is the patient's decision, right? So if that's the patient's value, that's an expression of patient autonomy because it's linked to a clear decision in a state where the patient can still make these and the patient considers what's best for them. That's something physicians have to then respect. Personally, this is what my wife says, I want to explain, but some people who are scared, anxious, they don't want to know. We ask the patients how much they want to know and then tailor our explanations to this. And the doctors, this is always very important, these conversations, the big conversations, right? After somebody had their diagnosis after big procedures, big milestones during their journey. The doctors, physicians, nurses prepare for these things. The team prepares for this together. Right, so this is a very important part. Can doctors refuse to treat a patient or take some of the requests seriously? If a physician has taken a patient, we need to do everything for them. We shouldn't do harm and we should benefit the patients. That's our duty. It's simple answer, no. Right, so it's not up to the doctors to decide who they want to treat. And how they want to treat them. There is a strong ethics, what we talked about, the basic principles. Are there any sure signs that people will die soon? Yes, there are some signs, usually before death: delirium, sleepiness, fatigue, inability to eat, and great weakness set in. Right, so delirium means people start sometimes to hallucinate or imagine things, see things that are not there, or they get lost in a memory. They relive a moment from their life. They start talking in ways that don't make any sense. Most people become very, very weak and sleepy. Yeah. Just before death, we can see the blood pressure drop, or the end of the fingers, the last digits become discolored and cold, breathing becomes irregular, apnea stops and starts up randomly, irregularly, right? So it is becoming harder and harder for people to breathe, and people try to keep breathing, but as you get weaker, the muscles can't do the job so well anymore, right? Okay, students free. What is the most difficult part of providing end-of-life care to patient? Some patients' ways of thinking, feelings, values are so different from the doctor's that we cannot understand what the patient really wants. It is hard to imagine and plan how to best talk to them, how to support them. Some patients went through very hard situations, and then it is difficult to imagine what it is like to be them. Yeah. Right, so empathy and sympathy, being able to imagine what it's like to be someone else in a certain situation, have their limits. These are human abilities we all have, but obviously our own experiences and personalities and background limit it somewhat. I think people often overestimate how limited, how big the difficulty of imagining what it is to be like someone else can be. at least for many basic general things, experiences that almost everyone goes through, work situations, school situations, friendship, love situations, family situations. We all have some experiences that help us to imagine these things, but the end of life is a very special time. And in the conversation with my wife, it also came up that of course, at the end of life, because people won't continue existing, some pressures disappear, or some coherence to the personality disappears. People can make some strange choices uh, because they won't be around to face the consequences, or it doesn't matter anymore whether that's consistent with who they are and how people see them. So sometimes things like that come on. All right, what else is difficult? The communication with patients and their families. Some people are panicky, anxious, or very worried and depressed. It's not easy to support people in these situations, and it can feel like words cannot do anything for them. We can listen, but there's nothing to say. When people complain, they won't see their children growing up, get married, and have a family, or all their parents are losing their adult child. Not much can be said that's meaningful, right? So of course, physicians who choose this line of work usually feel very strongly about wanting to help and support their patients. That's why they take on this difficult job to be there for people at the end of their life. And in some situations, they just have to listen and be there. But you can't help someone who looks at their child dying. Right, it sadly happens sometimes that someone in their 20s, 30s, 40s dies and their parents are still there and support them through that process, or people are worried about what's going to happen. Parents of young children die. That's a tremendous loss, right, that they don't have that time to see their children grow up and start their own lives, so to say. Um, how do you communicate with patients who know that they have little time left to live? We try to talk to them regularly and make more time for them. We sometimes ask the psychologist and nurse to attend. A nice, smiling support person can make it easier for patients to relax. Some people become nervous in front of doctors, and taking someone along helps patients to relax. So they ask and talk about important parts of their experience more easily. We talk to them sitting next to them, eye to eye, assuring them that we are not in a hurry. It's not good to visit someone if we only have a few minutes before another urgent task when we are under pressure. We can't give full attention to the patient. We have to learn many details of how to communicate and what attitude to take. Listening is the most important part. Patients are worried, they have pains, and they often don't want to talk to family about such things. It's also useful for us to know these things for their treatment. The team can support them better if we get to know them more. So teams meet, and the nurses, doctors, other specialists who are involved share details that help make the experience of the patient and the family better. Right. So listening, making time, and helping the patients to be relaxed during these conversations, longer conversations, is important at the end. How do you support the families of patients at the end of their lives? We discuss with families with families. Right. Sorry, that's before. I was typing this late at night when we had this conversation. We discuss with families before people depart, meaning that when people die, their bodies are taken away by a specialist company who prepare the dead body for the ceremonies, rituals, and cremation. So we discuss with families before people depart and their bodies are taken away by the funeral company. Especially nurses who worked with the patient try to say something encouraging. Right, this is a very important part. People remember intensely usually these moments, and what physicians and nurses say matters a lot. We want to reassure them that they did the right thing choosing palliative care for the patient. People need to know that they did enough and they did their best, right? So many people have doubts or guilt. Oh, maybe I should have taken care of this person, my mother at home. Maybe should not have sent them to the hospital for another month. Maybe should have tried to visit more often, and so on and so on. And whatever the truth is, in the end, the person is who was a patient is gone, and part of the job of the physicians is to help people move on in a way that they can find closure. If they keep these things open and keep returning to these questions, it's no use. You can't answer them in any good way. So this is a point where the families need support. Sometimes people have nurses prepare the patient for their final journey. So this was very interesting for me. I didn't know that, the nurses, my wife told me the nurses put on some makeup so that patients look a bit nicer when their family arrives and when they're taken away after people have died. And especially many women find it very important, right? How others see them, and that when their mother, sister, God forbid, daughter passes away, they also want to be, remember them as they have been at their best, right? Um, by that point, of course, you will have seen them sick and ill and very unwell many times. So it's not like you don't want the truth or you're lying to yourself. You just want to do something for them and let them go in a nice way. So sometimes nurses and the patients put on the makeup or favorite dress or hairstyle together, and it's a last kindness that they can perform for the people they love. How do you take care of yourself? Right, good question. Uh, so my wife said I try to talk to my colleagues. I try to be open about my emotions, sadness, anger, being upset, regret, happiness. I try to practice how to process things faster since new patients come quickly. We need to release our emotions intentionally. Right, normally we have our routines, how we take care of emotions and get rid of them and move on in life, but that can't be done always. You can't wait for that. We sometimes talk to our spouse, partner, family, and nurses sometimes relate to patients. Each patient has a primary nurse. Sorry, each nurse, each patient has a primary nurse who is mainly their caretaker. Right, so there is a team of dedicated nurses in palliative care units, and we can process things together. We can discuss what happened. Right, so the doctors do spend, of course, significant time with the patients, but they need to actually think about the different treatment options, coordinate how the multidisciplinary team helps figures out the treatment, and they have several patients, 10, 15, 20 at a time. So it's the specialist nurse who is the primary caretaker of a given patient who knows a lot, and often they're very big support or a good source of information or a partner in processing things for the physician. Suffering and walking through everything alone is harder, so it's important to communicate. On holidays, I try to fully switch off. We have an on-call system, so on some days we can fully switch off. On-call system means a long time ago, if you were a doctor and you took on a patient, that patient was your responsibility at all times. So if anything happened to any of your patients, you would get called by the hospital, maybe just for advice, and you can give advice through the phone, of course, but maybe sometimes you had to go. Your patient was unwell, there was an unexpected side effect, they needed a blood test done quickly, and so on and so on and so on. So This, of course, was enormously stressful and draining, and many doctors who were already, and physicians in general, who were already overworked, had developed all kinds of problems. So these days, usually an on-call system is used, which means that doctors take turns. Everyone has a basic understanding of all the cases in the unit, and if there are especially complicated cases, or cases where you suspect that the patient might be dying soon, then you explain it to your colleagues before you hand over at the end of the day to the on-call doctor, and the on-call doctor is going to take care of whatever happens during that night, right? So if you have 8 doctors, then 30 days in a month, everyone would get to do about 3.6 nights, right? So 3-4 nights a month when you would be on call. And then on those nights, you would have to take care of everything if you're not on call. No. What has left the deepest impression on you in your interactions with patients? Some patients are very memorable, some patients are very strong and give other people strength or happy feelings even in such a bad condition. Even when they're dying, they can encourage or channel positive feelings. In those cases, as a doctor, I feel really happy to have met them. This is very remarkable, and my wife really was happy to get this question. I think she really glowed up, and she said there truly are some remarkable patients who just have this ability to be very supportive and kind, and encouraging or supportive to their family and the physicians working with them. So that's a big treasure. It's not like most people aren't nice, it's simply that most people are too um, crushed by the situation, or at that point just too tired and weak to do much. But some people have some emotional and physical strength left. So the last questions from our students. Have you ever felt that what a patient or family wanted conflicted with what you believed was truly best for the patient's dignity or comfort? And how did you navigate that in general? Do you think it is more important to respect some patients and families' wishes, or to try to persuade them to do what you as a doctor believe is best for them? Well, difficult, right? I think part of this has already been answered, right? So, patient autonomy really means the patients can refuse treatments and choose. Here's the rest of the answer. We have an obligation to inform patients and their family well. We need to explain things in a way that people really understand what's good and bad about treatments. Sometimes, even after that, patients oppose what the doctors recommend. This is rare, but it happens. And we support patients as long as they don't want something really harmful. People who already come to a palliative care unit, PCU, want to avoid pain and suffering, so it's easy to work with them, right? So most patients are still well enough to make an autonomous choice when they go to PCU, palliative care units, and they talk to their family and other people around them. They go through their normal decision-making routines. They still have usually friends and others they can discuss this with. So usually they are quite cooperative, because in the end the PCU is about balancing treatment that makes life longer with quality of life, right? So a lot of people that choose palliative care don't want to extend their life at all costs. Right? So they don't want many more surgeries, many more trials with chemotherapy, radiotherapy, new medicine, whatever. They are slowly feeling that they're maybe it's best if they go. People have many reasons for that, but they want to be free of pain and enjoy the last bit of their life as much as possible. Have conversations, not to suffer. So because of this, I think in these units there are fewer disagreements as far as I understand from my wife's explanation. But it does happen. Harmful things, yeah, in some cases patients, for example, insist on taking homeopathic medicine or visiting healers and things like that. And of course you can allow them such things if they're not harmful. But at some point, if someone is really unwell, they have to stop going to their favorite like faith healer or fortune teller or something, simply because the visit is going to be too risky health wise. Right. So, but yeah, otherwise, sure, people do what they want to do. Okay, next question. Beyond language, what obstacles do you think international students or doctors face on the path of practicing medicine in Japan? I have to say, my wife is not an international doctor. She's Japanese. But here's her answer. Culture is the biggest obstacle. A few people have strong religious feelings that can be tough. And Japan is not a very religious country, but there's a very strong influence of tradition, right? So, in the same way, I'm secular, I'm not religious, right? But I grew up in Hungary, in Europe, and Europe is traditionally religious. So, even our non religious traditions of thinking and ideas about politics or community, for example, often have very strong elements of more maybe the Catholic or more socially oriented versions of Protestantism. Um, and if you look at more secular ideas, the European versions are usually more community oriented, and equality it plays a big role, and that might be, I'm not sure. There are definitely reasons for caring about equality that are totally independent from religion, but maybe the original motivation or source of thinking about it seriously is our intellectual tradition. And I think the same is true, for example, here in Japan. And Japanese culture is like a very special mix of homegrown culture, Shinto origins, and that mixed in different ways with Indian, Vietnamese, Chinese, mainly, of course, Korean traditions. And that has an effect on how people think about the end of life, the afterlife, um, their values, and so on. And that might be strange for people who don't come from here. As someone who moved here from Europe without any special interest or knowledge about Japan, I realized that it was very shocking how the entertainment life, business life, student life is the same as in Europe and the US. But then when it comes to how people actually experience and understand their own feelings and how they interact within these broader frameworks, um, some of the relations are really different and very specific, I think, to East Asia or even just to Japan. Japan is different in some ways from other East Asian countries, of course. In some ways, it's maybe the European traditions through the Meiji opening had a huge effect on Japan, and then the American occupation and very strong economic political connection has a very strong effect on Japan. In some ways you see like the effect, but of course then it's processed in a different way. So the same idea or movement is understood here differently by people a little bit or used differently. It can be quite difficult as a teacher as well. Uh, Very different to teach in Japan than teach in Europe or the US, I think. Last question from the last student. I cared for my grandmother with Alzheimer's for 2 years at home when I was in high school, and still carry some guilt about whether I did enough after she passed. So I want to ask if you ever look back on a case and wondered whether you could have done something differently, medically or ethically. How do you process the kind of retrospective doubt without it affecting your confidence in future cases? Yeah, it's a good question, and so here's actually my wife opened up a bit, and this is a bit personal. This is her answer. My grandmother had Alzheimer's too. She lived alone in the countryside. She's alone for a long time as she's well. She wanted to live alone. But one time when we visited, we noticed that she really was changed. She wasn't tidy, things were dirty, things were lost in the house, and we realized that she couldn't take care of herself anymore. So we arranged a specialist home for her, and we visited her regularly, but it was impossible to visit her very often due to work and school, and we could have done more, but it's hard. This feeling remains, and we did the best we could under the circumstances given our perspective at that time. Right. So I think my wife had a similar experience to my student. It's hard to feel that you have done enough, but here's what she went on to say: it's not good to blame ourselves, and keeping the good memories, the important nice things in mind is more important. So don't let the guilty feelings undermine your best memories. Patients love their family, and we will always have regrets. We can never do perfectly, but we made the best choice always under the circumstances. And this is a point that I often discuss with people when we talk about decision making. I sometimes teach philosophy of action, moral psychology, and it comes up there that given your motivations and your values, everyone tries to make the best choice always. Right? So things can limit, of course. We don't always have time, energy, knowledge, ability to make an amazing choice objectively seen. But relative to who we are in a given moment and what information we have, we try to do our best. Many things might undermine that, but yeah, so you probably did the best you could for your grandmother. So this is what she said. Last bit, this feeling comes up with patients too, regret, right? But there we discuss cases in a team and we get feedback from other experts, the family, and in the end, decision making is also a collaborative group effort. One person cannot really change these things usually, and hence we also don't feel bad that I could have done something more, right? So the personal and the professional context are really different. In the hospital, in the PCU unit, doctors would work with specialist nurses, and some people have really complex situations around the end of life, right? So someone might have pneumonia, cancer, immune problems, and other issues as well, um, and nervous system issues, digestive system issues, muscle issues, and so on, orthopedic issues, you name it. So often, several doctors have to work together, and the whole physician team talks about things, the family talks about things, and things are decided together. So, you know, maybe one person feels, oh, I could have done better, but um, probably consulted with the patient or their family or both and your colleagues, and everyone is trying to do their best. So in the end, if something could have been done better, it's not like you dropped the ball. It's, you know, everybody was blind maybe to something small, but usually really big mistakes are not made, or that much difference could not have been made if so many people collaborate together. Well, folks, thank you for your questions, and thank you for those of you who watched this. Um, it was a very nice experience for me as well to sit down with my wife and talk about these things, and I learned more about her work and her job and how she feels about these things. And I hope this knowledge will be useful, and it was an interesting conversation for all of you. I'll ask a connected question to this on the online surface, and please keep looking out for, I think, 2 more short videos on medical ethics. Have a great day. Take care of yourselves and those you love and care about, and have a splendid rest of your day. Bye bye.